Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Welcome back, everyone, to the new Cyber Frontier. My name is Sean Murray. We have a special guest with us today. We are going to welcome Marcelle Lee. She is the Senior Security Researcher at SecureWorks, and in her part-time hours, her volunteerism, she is also the Chief of Cyber for the simulation for the Women's Society of Cyberjutsu. Welcome, Marcelle. How are you?
Oh, thanks, Sean. I'm good. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have someone representing women in cyber. Talk about the glass ceiling. We talk about representing, and it's always great to get all sorts of professionals from different areas and backgrounds. But you're a researcher, and so you're looking at a lot of media. You're looking and having conversations with people. And you've been around the block for a long time. So getting you to contribute to our podcast is wonderful. And so I'd say welcome to our podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. As I said, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the work that you all are doing with promoting diversity, because I've certainly noticed that in your previous podcasts. So I'm a senior security researcher at SecureWorks, as you mentioned. I'm also the lead for emerging threats research. So I'm a bit of a combination of a sort of regular analyst that can write reports and analyze threat intel data. And then I'm also a bit of a hunter, where I'm going out and looking for new and interesting and emerging type threats. And then I also do the technical analysis piece. So my particular passion is network forensics. I love looking at the packet capture. Wireshark is my favorite tool in the world. And I have a lot of favorite tools, but it's hands down. So I like nothing better than to follow a thread from start to end, like identifying maybe a phishing campaign and drilling down to see what's happening, who's being targeted. That's just one example, but that's what gets me excited and keeps me getting up every morning and happy to go to my job, because I love digging into that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. A true geek by heart. I love it. I don't get to hang around with
I am a true geek by heart.
I don't get to hang around with a lot of technical people, and when I do, I relish that time. So, well, great. It's great to have you on the show. We're going to have a great conversation. As a security researcher, a senior security researcher, what are the types of things that you're actually looking at? So it sounds like you've got a highly technical background. You're out there looking at a lot of I'm assuming, like technical exploits and things like that. What other types of research and what are the products, or what do you bring to the table once you complete your research? Are you doing publications? How do you contribute back to the community with that research?
Right. So, there's two angles to that, really. Sort of the secure workspace. I'm a team of about 20 researchers on what is called the Counter Threat Unit Cyber Intelligence Cells. So we all work collectively on different areas, that kind of thing. But what I've been working on the most lately is I am apparently the coronavirus queen, as I like to call it, because I've been tracking all the activity that we've been observing around threat activity and COVID-19. And there's lots of it. So around that space. I've done a couple of webinars now, contributed to a number of other publications that we have on our special COVID-19 page on our the regular workings space. I write a blog on Medium that is primarily geared towards doing cyber competition walkthroughs. So I'll just take a challenge that I built and then break it down for the readers on like how you would tackle that particular challenge. And those seem to be fairly popular. And sometimes I write about getting started in cybersecurity. I have a whole series of blogs on that topic, though I haven't done those much lately. So I'm fairly out there in terms of publishing things.
That's awesome. We're going to come right back right after a word from our sponsor. We're talking to Marcel Lee from SecureWorks. We're going to take a break with our sponsor. We'll be right back.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
Sean Murray, New Cyber Frontier. We have a special guest. We have Marcel Lee, Senior Security Researcher and Chief of Cyber for the Games Division at Women's Society of Cyberjutsu. We're talking about, what does a senior researcher do? What do they look at? And, given the times right now, the self-proclaimed COVID queen, taking a look at a lot of the threats that are going on, for social distancing, working remotely. What I think is awesome is a person like you, and I've had several conversations. We are going to produce so much information, so much data from this pandemic in so many different industries. What went well? Where were our challenges? How can we do things better? And what did we learn that maybe we didn't know before? As a senior researcher, I'm sure that you are just swimming in information and data right now.
Yes, that's pretty accurate assessment of the situation. And I mean, really, we've gotten to what I would call maybe a tapering off point in terms of, and I'm talking threat activity, cyber threat activity with COVID-19. Like, I'm not a doctor who can talk to the medical stuff. So the cyber threat activity seems to be tapering off. Like, I haven't seen anything particularly new and exciting in the past week or so. But what we have seen over the past really 2 months are, a variety of different phishing campaigns, primarily dropping info stealers and rats. That's been the most of the malware that we have observed. Some ransomware, but not so much with the COVID-19 theme. The ransomware is just sort of a thing out there. And that's another topic we could talk about too, is the whole name and shame phenomena that's happening right now in that space. But we've also seen nation state activity, one country targeting another country with sort of phishing or maybe malicious apps, even type of activity that we normally see, but such an amazing just swing towards using COVID-19 as the bait or the lure, if you will. So that's been really interesting. But yeah, like I said, nothing particularly revealing in terms of like tactics, techniques, and procedures or TTPs. Just the same old stuff, kind of, just with a different base on it.
Sure. So, one of the things that me and some of my colleagues are talking about is the impact that social media and the media in general is having on emphasizing or metastasizing the threat or that fear from everybody working at home. So we have more access now to social media and media than we normally do. Media, regular mainstream media is being criticized for, not having the integrity it did, 20, 30 years ago in sensationalizing different topics. How does that feed into the research that you do for the threats that you're seeing as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's kind of funny because I was thinking sort of about this just recently, because I've seen over the past week a number of articles that say completely opposite things from each other. So there's some news outlets or various sources that are like, ransomware attacks are up, so, whatever percentage. And then I'll see an article from another group that says ransomware attacks are down. And it's so there's a lot of spin, I think, when it comes to looking at stats in our industry, and people tend to have that sort of confirmation bias, I think, where they take the numbers and make the story that they want out of it. Which makes it hard for, a researcher who's looking at this data and hoping to pick something out that's good from it. But yeah, you can't trust everything you read. We all know that, of course. But I will say, with regard to social media is actually a really good source for security research, specifically with regard to Twitter. Like, I get a lot of good leads from Twitter because there's a number of, security people on there who are sharing data that they find. I was just looking at some research today on Android apps that are targeting Pakistani users. So a lot of that, like, goodness or information I wouldn't have seen probably if it hadn't popped up on Twitter. So I mean, there's always sort of a plus and minus to everything.
Yeah, I think it's more of using your intellect as a researcher to know, what appears to be biased or, not foundation. It doesn't have a foundation of integrity behind it. It's more of an opinion or someone's bias. Give us a little bit a background on what is it that you're contributing to over at Women's Society of Cyberjutsu?
Oh yeah. I am in charge of cyber competition programming, and basically what that looks like is I have a number of share upcoming events that we can do together or individually. I have a Slack site that I use to promote communications on that, and we have a fair number of members now. We do probably, I'd say, 2 to 3 competitions together a month, pretty much as many as I can find. And then when we're not doing competitions, we're actively building competitions as well. So part of like my contribution, I guess I would say, I never think of it that way, workshop called CTF for Noobs. And I've done this with a number of other people, partnered up with them. And essentially what we do is, it's promoted as a workshop to learn about cyber competitions, but we actually have the participants do a cyber competition. They just don't know that until they get there. So that's the best way to learn how to do it.
Jump right in.
Is just to get in and do it. So I should say people are, worried that they don't have enough skills, or they're going to look silly, or they're going to let down their team. And really none of that is true. I've been doing cyber competitions for years. And when I started, I didn't have the slightest idea what was happening. And there's still definitely weak spots for me. Like if it's a packet capture, I'm all over that. If it's a web app testing type thing, not so much. That's not my skill set. But doing competitions are such a great way to learn new things and to enhance your skills, and not to keep beating PCAPs to death. But one of the early competitions that I did was a digital forensics Ctf, and it was put on by a group called DC3, the Defense Cyber Crime Center. And unfortunately, they don't do it anymore because it was a pretty awesome competition. But you had to analyze various types of challenges and then actually do a write-up about the challenge, like how you solved it. which was kind of cool that they focused on that core skill area as well. But that was the first time I ever saw a packet capture file. And I'll always remember looking at this challenge file, and it's a PCAP. And like the first thing I did was Google what's a PCAP because I had no idea. And that's what kind of sparked my interest in network forensics from the get-go. And, I never looked back. I've always loved that. Not necessarily true for every type of challenge I've ever done, but that one really, really stuck with me. So one of the things I always recommend to people is to build your toolkit, and I'll put little air quotes around that. But having your go-to setup for doing a competition, but you can also use it for all sorts of other things like your actual work or other projects you might be working on. And I recommend starting with a virtual machine environment using hypervisor of your choice. I personally like VirtualBox. Have a Kali Linux pen testing distro and a number of other virtual machines, and just start banging away at some of the tools that are in there and learn how to use the different tools. So it's such good exposure, and I think people just don't necessarily ever have the use for maybe a hex editor, for example, until they come across a challenge that is easily solved by using one.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned that.
So we're actually working. I'm part of. Okay.
It's funny you mentioned the hex editor. I used to do analysis work for Army Cyber over in Europe, and I was probably the oldest guy on the team, and a lot of the younger guys. They're flying through 1,000 miles an hour, and they called me the old man. And one day I'm doing some analysis and I'm using a hex editor, and they're like, they come over, they're like, "Hey, what are you doing? What is that? Hex editor? What is that?" I'm like, "Oh, the old man knows some skills that the young guys don't." And so, it's great to use these tools and geek out. It's interesting, Wireshark at ISSA International a few years ago. We actually recognized the gentleman who created Wireshark and gave him a big award. He comes up and he goes, what started out as a weekend project, quickly it got out of hand. And so, of course, it's open source and it got open to the community. Everybody's built so many capabilities into it. But you can actually get a certification in Wireshark, and the body of knowledge is that thick. And my hunt analyst at Army Cyber, she actually went out and she goes, "That's the next cert that I want to get." So she reminds me of you. We're like, "Oh, Wireshark is my favorite tool." It's awesome. I'd like to go ahead and I'd like to go ahead and break real quick for our sponsor, and we'll be right back with Marcel Lee. This is Sean Murray for the New Cyber Frontier. Our special guest today is Marcel Lee from SecureWorks. She is a senior researcher, a security researcher over at SecureWorks. Been having a great conversation regarding some of the stuff she's doing research-wise, and then she contributes to volunteers her time for a women's nonprofit, Women's Society of Cyberjutsu. So let's take a look at. You're talking about the cyber competitions and some of the things that you're running there, and you're right. If you want to get into the business, you don't have to invest a lot of money. And there's so much virtualization now. You can use your computer to go into a virtualized environment and play around with tools in a safe environment. Don't do it at work unless you have permission, right? You don't want to get in trouble,
right?
Especially if you're analyzing malware. You don't want to do that on your computer at work. We've had some. Yeah,
don't go to the sketchy websites on your work computer. That's also bad.
So one of the things I want to pivot to, and that is we don't get enough visibility we talk about diversity, women in cyber. How has that changed things for you, and how do you feel as a woman in this career field, and how do you perceive your contribution?
Yeah, so it's funny. I didn't realize that there was such a lack of diversity in this field until fairly kind of far into it. I'm a career changer. I did not start out in cyber. I've only been in the industry for about 10 years, did something else entirely before this. And I really got my start by taking classes at the local community college. And the beginning classes were, fairly developed, particularly this one, very fun, like getting further and further into it. And I'm taking like the like CCNA prep classes and things like that. I suddenly noticed that like I was the only woman in the room, or maybe there was one other woman in the room. And it just kind of hit me then. I was like, oh, this is not what I'm used to. And my first degree was econ, so it was definitely kind of a 50-50 split, I would say. But yeah, so, I looked around me, I was like, oh, I'm not the same as everybody else here. And it was around this time that I discovered Women's Society of Cyberjutsu. And the founder, Lisa, she started it because she had the same experience of really being the only woman in the room. And she just wanted to meet other women who were kind of into geeking out, like you said, and that kind of thing. So she started up a series of workshops, and I caught wind of this and went to my first workshop with them, which was on like Metasploit or something like that. And it was such a cool experience to sit in a room full of other women who also like to do the same thing, because I was used to like my regular friends, my non-cyber friends, and like my mom crew and all those people who didn't have the slightest idea what I was doing or why I was doing it. And so all of a sudden I got to meet all these women who were into it too. So that was such a game changer for me. And at some point, I started speaking publicly about diversity. I've done a number of talks, actually around the world on the topic, and a fair bit of research. And I think, the best thing that people can do is to support organizations like Cyberjutsu, and we're certainly not the only ones. There's other ones out there. And then just to, look around the room when you're hiring people and try to consider, is there something that's making you just hire the same kind of people over and over again? Or is there something you could do differently to attract a broader audience? I wrote an article for ISACA's journal last year about, I forget exactly what the title was, I should know, but it was about finding the purple squirrel, the elusive candidate that doesn't actually exist. And that's part of the issues with hiring women, and not just women, other diverse populations. Job postings, for one thing, are written in a manner that is likely to make women not apply. We're all familiar with like the job postings that have a laundry list of expectations, and there's been a number of studies that show that women will look at those job postings and, sort of mentally do a little list or checklist. It's like, okay, I don't have this, I don't have that, I can't apply to this job. Whereas a man is more likely to be like, oh, I got like 50% of this, I'll apply for this job. And so women are sort of excluding because they don't think that they're right for the position. So that's something to be mindful of. And I have noticed a few different companies are wording it differently, like sort of nice to have, not required. But I do collect like the sort of outrageous job postings for fun because they're good in my research. So yeah, that's one way to look at it. And then looking at what you're focusing on, like if you're in your company culture, like, the sort of stereotypical Nerf guns and foosball table, like when I hear that kind of stuff, or I see it in the job posting, which you will actually see that mentioned, like, oh, we have all these things. I'm like, that's not the place I want to work, because I don't want to go hang out in a frat. I want to just do real work. So there's a number of different things that can be addressed, but That's just a couple.
Yeah, so it turns into a culture thing, right? So in a lot of it is based on our age as well. So as a Gen Xer, I like the more structured. I can be mobile. I can work from anywhere. I've been doing it for years, but I like structure. I would like a schedule. I like to, what are the tasks? What have I got to get accomplished? So it comes down to a culture thing. And diversity, men, women, one of the things that I tend to see with women in the technological workforce is there's a lot of the same mindsets when it comes to the technology. But I like your analogy of, women will talk themselves out of a job because, that they don't meet everything on that list. And that's too bad. I like it when an HR department puts core competencies and then, preferred, candidate will have maybe some additional skill sets. That just comes down to, good, PD writing. But, so we're towards the end. I can't believe it's already been a half an hour. We're talking to Marcel Lee, on the new Cyber Frontier. And I'd like to ask, what are your parting thoughts, Marcel?
Just say, with regard to the thing you were just talking about culture and scheduling and whatnot, if you're working from home now and you're not really used to that, be kind to yourself. Don't kill yourself feeling like you have to be on the clock 24/7 because you don't. I find it useful to set alarms on my phone for like start of work day. I have workout breaks, like 1 a.m, 1 p.m, lunch break, end of day. So, just keep it kind of regular schedule wise and it'll be much better for you in the long run. But yeah, I think that's it for me. And I've really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, our audience really appreciate your perspective. Senior researcher, contributing out into the public community as well. Geek at heart. I love it. We'll have to have some additional conversations on the side. But we do appreciate you contributing to the new Cyber Frontier for this podcast. We have been talking to Marcel Lee, who's a senior researcher at SecureWorks. Thank you, Marcel.
Thank you.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.